Hello, everybody. Grant Hunter here for Product Conversations. May, we've been talking roadmaps for like years. I remember when we were doing the Product Ops Alliance stuff a few years back, how we got to know you. Roadmaps were identified by the product ops people as the first thing that most of them were asked to focus on. I'd love to get your take as our resident product ops expert. You know, when you think about roadmaps and product operations, talk to me about product operations and roadmaps.
Uh, I think I don't think we're ready to talk about that. I
Okay.
think that's going to have to be a bit later. But one of the things that it is right, like the first thing most product ops people get asked to do is build a roadmap. Um, and then you start scratching away at the surface and you realize that this organization is not ready for what they think their roadmap is. So it's that how do you balance what you're being asked to do while also like bringing together that cohesion that people expect a roadmap to bring. And I'm gonna just let it go
Leave
there.
it at that, and we'll see where this conversation goes.
I want to add to that. It's like, isn't it the first thing that every product person is asked, whether the product ops, product management, etc., is build a roadmap, create something to tell us what you're going to do in the near
Yeah. Well, we're going to dig into this. We got a great panel today. This is our first crossover episode. A couple weeks ago, Talking Roadmaps released the podcast I had done with Justin, one of the best conversations I've ever had. And I've been saying this a lot. Talking Roadmaps is one of my, if not my favorite podcasts in the product space. The guests that Phil and Justin have been having on over the past few years, amazing. I mean, it's a who's who of list of people who we should be talking about. Elliott's been on there, so we got Elliott Golden, who's been a regular on the product conversations, and obviously Wong is here as well. And we're going to have a great conversation on talking roadmaps. And so the first question I wanted to pose is to our talking roadmaps people. Phil and Justin, you guys have interviewed more than 60 people. I actually went through and counted all the episodes, and it's probably close to 70 episodes, but some of them weren't interviews. They were just you guys. And, what over all those interviews, what was the most provocative take you guys have seen on roadmaps? I'm going to start with Phil on this one.
I mean, so you're right. It's actually 69 that we've recorded. 64 have gone live, and 2 of them were us interviewing each other, in fact.
Okay.
That was our MVP. We had to test it as proper product people. But what's the most provocative? Well, I'm going to start with, I guess, Marty's perspective of we shouldn't have roadmaps.
Okay.
And then when you dig and scratch and get under the surface, you suddenly get to, actually, most people do have roadmaps. They're quite useful.
Oops.
As long as they're done right. And that's the challenge. It's like roadmaps are a useful tool in aligning people on a direction of travel. And I guess my provocative take is I'm happy to throw roadmaps out so long as we can get everyone aligned on a direction of travel and keep them there for a sustained duration of time, but I've not found a better tool for doing it yet.
Okay, I like that. And we'll dig a little more into that. Justin, outside of we don't need roadmaps, what would you say is the most provocative take you've seen on roadmaps in all of your interviews?
I think we've had a few people on the channel. The one that's in mind, and I'm not going to name names, but it was someone that Phil interviewed, was kind of...
So it's not me, good.
It's not you. You can see a lot of people have been burnt by roadmaps, right? And I can certainly empathize with that. When I was a product manager, a little green behind the ears, I was like, wet behind the ears, green to the situation. Somebody asked me for a roadmap and I created it and I got myself into a whole world of pain. And so I think a lot of the time, it's there's no wonder that kind of 65% of product managers claim that road mapping is one of the most difficult parts of their job. And so during the channel, we're going to speak to people like that. But I think what's happened is people have done it with good intentions and then got burnt by it. And so they're like, I don't like this road mapping way of working. It's more waterfall. It's more these types of things. And so that's kind of been the feedback that we've got from people. We're not wedded to it. We talk roadmaps. It doesn't mean we're pro roadmaps. It's just it was an interesting
I talk product. I am pro product. So, I mean, if the name of your podcast is Talking Roadmaps, I would think, I don't know. I'm being provocative. Steve, I'm always reminded of one, the stat you always say is that roadmaps are the number one requested artifact, but the least understood.
But the least understood. It's like salespeople say, I want a roadmap, when they mean, when is the feature that I asked for going to be delivered? That's an entirely different requirement. Leadership says, I've got to show something to the board that shows that we've got a 5-year plan. And that's an entirely different use of a roadmap. And, I do like to channel Jana Bosto's comment that ideally your roadmap is a prototype of your strategy. But in reality, no, and that is reality. But we unfortunately also use the term roadmap to mean a tactical delivery schedule for the next, 6 weeks. And I think one of the biggest problems maybe the whole world, but at least in product management, is language. Like bi-weekly means both twice a week and every other week. Literally means figuratively now, because so many people say, well, literally my head blew off. And you're like, did it though? Not literally. And roadmap is in that category for me. It's just like, anytime there's time on the horizontal, they call it a roadmap.
So whether it's a release plan or something else, if it's got the time element, I've got someplace to go. I'm going to digress for a second, which I often do. Is there any term in product that only has one meaning? That if you say it, everybody knows? I mean, product management is not that term. Roadmaps is not that term.
Marketing.
Product is not that. I mean, I feel like maybe it's the practice of product that's the problem. Maybe other practices have, we don't have FASB or whatever to give us gap and tell us exactly a definition of language and stuff. But it seems like roadmap is just like all those other product terms where there's so many different definitions of it.
And let me add to that just for a second.
And I'll come to you, Phil.
Only 40% of product managers have ever been trained in product management. So there's all this telephone stuff that's going on with words like roadmap or personas or whatever else. And they're like, well, I kind of learned this from, the guy in the next cubicle, as opposed to, a following like a body of knowledge.
Yeah, I agree with that. Phil, you were going to say something?
Yeah, essentially I was getting to the same point. It's like there's that semantic, what the heck is the thing? There was a tweet from John Cutler a few years ago about roadmaps that really just embodied it to me. We ask it to do too many jobs.
Yes.
We ask that one thing to do too many jobs. It's like we hire it to give us certainty about delivery. We hire it to give us direction of travel. We hire it to give us timing. You could probably list 100 things that we hire it to. And in fact, and different audiences hire it to do different jobs. There's even the more complicated bit.
Do you know what a roadmap is? A roadmap's a Gantt chart. I knew it would work.
but yes, it is, if that works for your organization.
I'm not saying a working roadmap is a Gantt chart. I'm just saying that's what it ends up being, right? Like, it's a lot of the time, if you're not intentional around a roadmap, that's what it turns into over time. Because you don't take the time to like figure out what it's actually doing, right? Like it's not. It's so. Here's
the problem is a roadmap is a Gantt chart that has no resources on it or effort of work, right? So it's like all of these things are just made up bullshit because we haven't scoped it or defined it or figured out how big it is and what team is going to work on it. So it's like, could you please give me a Gantt chart where all of the information in it is unknown?
It looks like Elliott disagrees with us. So
yeah. When you said it was bullshit, I was like, well, as a water fountain of bullshit, I can jump in here and be an expert.
Boy, the FCC is going to have an issue with this broadcast.
Now I wish I didn't promote this so hard on my in general, when you talk about it being a Gantt chart with everything that's not there, it doesn't really show you where you essentially have overcommitted there as well. It's like the old joke of you'll use 100% of your resources for the commits that sales has made and the other 100% of the things that actually matter. It really puts you in a situation where it's really, really easy to add another row to that Gantt chart or another bullet point to that slide, but it puts you in a situation where that bullet point or that line on the chart becomes a form of commitment and you're putting your integrity on the line. So that really creates a lot of challenges. And it really, that's why there's a lot of product manager burnout, I think, is because the pressure to deliver both self-inflicted and others' expectations.
Well, let's even go down the Gantt route, right? Henry Gantt invented the Gantt chart building the Hoover Dam. It was late and they did all the resource planning.
Okay, that is the deepest history I've ever gotten on the Gantt chart. I did not know that it was created for the Hoover Dam. That's, every week we do this, I get new knowledge. I want to sort of ground us, and I'm going to ask a question, and we'll build on each other. Hopefully, we'll do some yes-anding, or we'll be doing some disagreement. But just at its essence, we've talked about the ambiguity of terms, but at its essence, what is a roadmap or what should it be? And I'm going to let Elliott start there because he's been the most quiet.
That's great. I mean, I think I'll kind of go back to what I talked about with Phil during our conversation on talking roadmaps. Is like it's really an expectation it's a communication device for you to communicate your values in terms of what you expect your product or products to be in the future. So it's just a communication about what you expect things to be in the future and what value you intend to deliver there as well. I think
so. It's a communication tool on the value you plan to deliver.
A visual communication tool that then can be used to interpret different things. And now with the road mapping tools that are out there, you can then create different branches of the story to then highlight things that are more important to different audiences. And that's the value of those tools, to automate that process for the different stakeholder groups, of which there are infinite numbers.
Yeah. And but at its essence, at its core, it's that communication of our plan of what the value we're going to create, and sort of some sense of order, right? Whether we put timeline on it or not, but it's like, we'll do this before we do that.
Yeah, priorities, and then could be a measure of time as well, but really it's a measure of your values. But I want to say like values, meaning like your company, your organization, your team's values, because your prioritization is an expression of what you prioritize, which are essentially your core values. Okay,
I like it. I like that start for it. May, what do you have to add or argue?
I think so. So I'm going to go back to the whole question of when you are asked to build a roadmap, what is actually needed, right? Generally speaking, from the lens of a product manager or the product management team, what they're really trying to get at is some sort of stability so that their teams can actually build the thing for a little bit. That's what people want, right? And a roadmap on the product side comes with the assumption that everyone else has mostly sort of agreed to the near-term thing so that you can get that period of focus. The goal is near-term focus, because you can talk about the things in the long term that's coming, but like it's not here yet. And you tell people, oh, we're going to do this next, or oh, we're going to do this in 6 months when we get there. And it's that period of stability that's so desperately needed by so many product teams. Right. So I think that is the purpose of what product wants from a roadmap. Now, what everyone else is looking at is, I need timelines. Engineering needs, okay, we need to make sure that if we're going to build this out in 6 months, we have all the prerequisite stuff. So there's like a degree of like architecture or infrastructure planning. There's a degree of like, what are we going to tell our shareholders? Do we need additional investment if we want to actually accomplish this? Are we planning with our growth or really sizing in mind if the company is going to shrink a little bit? Are we planning with profit in mind if that is if revenue is the real driver right now, right? Especially in 2024. So I think there are a lot of things to consider in terms of the outputs or even the outcomes of a roadmap that are the unintended consequences of the desire for that short-term focus.
So I think this comes into some of what Phil was talking about with Cutler's post from a couple of years ago. There's so many different needs that we're trying to solve for this. We talked about short-term alignment of what we're going to work on so we can focus on it. We can talk about long-term when it comes to, especially in the B2B enterprise space where I come from, making sure that the clients know where we're going, they're getting on the right bus. You talked about the architecture of it, whether it's a prerequisite or hey, I can solve this problem now in multiple ways. If I solve it in one way, it makes it 10 times harder to get to where we want to go, right? It creates technical debt. And so we can, all these different audiences, and maybe that's the problem, is we have all these different audiences that have a need for it, and we're trying to do a one-size-fits-all thing to do it. So I'm just summarizing so far. Phil, your chance to chime in, add on, argue against.
Yes, and all of them. And that's actually why Justin and I created an audience canvas to actually understand the audiences, so we can actually, essentially it's a persona for those different audiences, and we work with people in a workshop to do that. Literally, we did a workshop this lunch, which was the second stage of that workshop, where we were doing the visualization part of it, like, because we've got 14 different visual patterns as well now that we've identified. But it's a communication tool, it's an alignment tool, it's a storytelling tool, it's a selling tool, because frankly, a product exists to create customer and business value. And if we ain't creating business value, we're not doing our job. And so that helps our customers know if we are going the same direction as them, if we're going to go on the same journey as them, that it makes sense for them to hop on our train and go with us.
No, I completely and totally agree with that. Again, coming from an enterprise B2B space where people are locking in 5-year, 3-year, 5-year deals, they need to know that the direction you're going is the direction they're going. I always remember the analogy Steve used to use. It's like if I'm driving from Washington to Boston, somebody's got to know that I'm going to Boston. The way I get there may be different, but eventually Boston is the end destination. Justin, your turn.
Yeah. So again, a lot of things that were said there, kind of the alignment, the communication, set direction. I think it's also to share confidence or not confidence in some of the things you're going to be working on. And it's really important to do that. When people see it written down, they assume that can't be changed. And I think that's really dangerous. But picking up on something you mentioned was actually audience-centric road mapping. We create roadmaps because we want to share something and we want feedback from other people. And so I think we really need to think deeply about what does that exchange look like? When somebody asks us for a roadmap, what are they really asking us for? Are they asking us for confidence? Are they asking us for direction? Are they asking us for strategy? And then similarly, what are we expecting in return? A lot of people think that the roadmap is about them or their product, and it shouldn't really be. It's about your audience. What are you wanting from those stakeholders in return? So that's kind of how I would think about it a little bit.
It's interesting because, we come from a world where it was like, oh, there's two types of roadmaps. There's an internal roadmap and there's an external roadmap, and the level of detail is a little different, but it's really, even internally, there's so many different audiences for how they need to use it. I worked with a big ed tech who had multiple divisions and they were trying to have a core platform. One of the key things was they wanted to figure out, what do we build into the platform for everybody? What are those common things we can build once versus something else? It was a planning mechanism for that.
Grant,
and so
I've actually got 5 standard views typically I'm working on now.
Okay.
But I want to make this point. It's one roadmap. It is all still consistent. It is all coming from the same source of truth.
Yep.
But you have multiple views on it. You're choosing what to present to each of those audiences. If it's not the same roadmap, it's not consistent, you are just setting yourself up for a world of hurts.
No, I love that. And I'm going to ask the question for you to dig into those 5 in a second. I wanted to give Steve a chance on this question. I tried to make it as difficult as possible for Steve, because he's Steve. So everybody's already come out and said a whole bunch of stuff. How can Steve add to that?
Well, as you were talking about the audiences, I just remembered a time when I shared my roadmap and the salesperson, Kevin, the world's worst salesperson, came up and said, "Hey, can I get a PowerPoint version of that so I can edit it?" And no good could come from that, right?
No.
And so anyway, I think Phil's spot on. It's like we all use the core data is the same. It's just different views. But yeah, don't make it editable by anybody who's trying to close a deal.
No, I completely agree with that. I think for me, what a roadmap is, and we've talked about it some, it's an alignment tool, right? But let me see if I can do this properly, if I can find it. Scott Sellhorst had said something I thought was brilliant, and here we go. Phil Hornby also said it's a creation tool. The act of describing your strategy in a roadmap helps you refine your strategy. And this is, I'll go back to Drucker, who said, the most value in building a strategic plan is not the strategic plan itself, it's the planning you do into it. So I remember, when I was teaching road mapping before, that was one of the biggest lessons is the biggest value of the roadmap is not the roadmap itself. It's the process you go through to build that roadmap, because that's how the strategic thinking, the refinement, the trade-offs, everything else that we have to go into that. So Phil, I'd love to get, before I go to my next question, what are your 5 audiences?
So I'm just going to say absolutely agree with that whole road mapping is the important bit, not roadmaps. Heck, I love saying if you're spending more than 30 minutes on your roadmap a month, you're doing too much, because you should be doing all the work in the background, the road mapping, and then it's an easy job. But so my typical 4 or 5 audiences are development and operations, like the people who are going to deliver this stuff. They want relatively short-term, high detail. Senior leadership, executives, maybe going up to investors as well. They want long-term, broad strokes, but still all the internal detail, all the internal information, like they're inside the house. They're my typical internal ones. Then I've got external, where I'm going to customers and sales with them. I've already got a relationship with customers, and I've got a level of trust with sales, so I'm going to tell them a certain level of detail, maybe show them a little bit more inside the curtain. I've got prospects, and this is almost kind of the wrong way around, but prospects, you don't know them yet. You don't trust them. So you might not show them quite so much inside the curtain yet. Yep. But actually, by showing them inside the curtain more, you might win the deal. So you've got that tension there.
Yep.
And then my 5th one is partners. Because if I'm working with partners, there's a subtly different view that they need to care about. It's a little bit more close to the development and operational folks.
Yeah. I love those. And I can see they're all different flavors, right? The one question I would have, and again, coming from a B2B enterprise space, what about analysts? Which one would you share with analysts? Is it that senior leader exec one because we're trying to paint the strategy and vision and you're doing this under non-disclosure? Or is it that customer and sales one?
I think it would be one of those two. Product answer, it depends. I might create a special version of it for them. Like that's my core 5, but I've come across 5 or 6 more that sometimes are needed. So it's not like it's just that's the 5 and that's all you ever need. You might not need partners. You might keep customers and sales and prospects the same. But those are the 5 that I found most useful in B2B. But with analysts, you can imagine them the same.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love these. Next question: what's the biggest misconception about roadmaps?
I'll start. The biggest misperception of the roadmap is that it is a commitment document rather than a plan.
So it is our plan. Our release plan then becomes a commitment. Was that so? One way to tell the difference between?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I would say that.
Okay.
A release plan, you're pretty committed to. I mean, you've got the resources, you've done the design, you know what you're building, you know roughly when we're going to have it come out. But the roadmap is beyond that. So well, I'm repeating myself. So yeah, it's not a commitment, it's a plan, and it's subject to change. And but that was the other thing. I presented my roadmap to the sales team, and I said, here's our plan. And one of the salespeople said, is this a commitment or a plan? And I said, it's a plan. And he said, I want to hear you say it's a commitment. And I said, okay, fine. I commit that I will do this and nothing else. And they're like, wait a minute, we need to be able to change it. So pick a side of an argument, man.
Yeah.
Well, but I think with that said, there's a clear need for something that is a commitment document, a release plan or whatever you want to call it, and something that is a prototype of your strategy. It's a vision into the value you're going to create over time and where you're trying to go. I think I like that. Okay. Misconception or misperception.
Just to add to Steve's there, I mean, it's, I'd be happy to say to sales, it's a commitment if they will guarantee to which deal they're going to close on which date. Let's put them on a level playing field to us. If they're going to hit an objective of a number on a sales sort of on their forecast, great. We'll hold us to an outcome as well. Let's play on a level playing field. I think that's about finding the fair ground. My misconception for you though is that it belongs to product management.
It does not belong to product management. It belongs to the organization.
Yeah, it belongs. So the roadmap at the squad level belongs to the squad. It has to be something that everyone in the squad is bought into. At the broader tribe or whatever you want to call it level, it belongs to that organization. It's not product management and that kind of line of leaders. It's everyone in there that has to be bought into it.
I agree completely, because there's been many times, and I was working with a client and we were doing our Q1 planning work, and we came in and we're like, what do we need to clarify? Where are you? We've got a list of priorities. We've got a list of things that you have low confidence on. Start with one or the other. And the product manager from one of the teams came out and said, 1 through 6, we're totally good on. And the designer and tech leader said, whoa, right? You can't do that. It has to be everybody together. So I love that idea that it's a team. It's owned by the organization, because the reality is what product's doing is basically we're putting an order to things we've identified, but many of those ideas have come from parts of the organization. That order may change because of engineering needs and prerequisites. There's so much of it that we can't just do ourselves. We need to have that partnership. I love that, Phil. That's a great one.
In fact, we've got to be a little careful the language you did yourself there, Grant. You said what product does. Yeah. Engineering is part of product. Design is part of product. We're all product. Product management is doing the admin and bringing it together. And we've got to kind of recognize that kind of... That
100%. 100%.
I will object to the word admin and more facilitation.
We are not admins and we're not glue. So who's next? Biggest misconception.
I'll jump in. So, man, there's so many things to share. It's difficult to know where to start. But I think the biggest misconception is doing a Google search of roadmap and then looking at everything that you get back. Right? It's just an utter minefield of bad examples, templates that are well-meaning. I don't really like to give templates to folks because I think the best roadmap is the one that you've engineered for your audience and for your organization. I think there's some helpful things, but there's not one size fits all here. But the other thing I want to talk about, it piggybacks onto the roadmap being a delivery plan. A roadmap or a strategic roadmap. I've often hunted for a better word for these things, but a strategic roadmap, for me, I often say that people need to pivot their thinking. And pivot for me is an acronym. It stands for, a strategic roadmap should be around problems and opportunities. So that's the P. Ideas and hypotheses. It should be around value, outcomes, or themes. And so I think if you can think of that in your thinking, it will help you to create a more strategic roadmap that is going to change much less often, because those strategic direction is going to change less often. We're going to understand that in Q3 we want to go after this customer problem, and Q4 we want to go after this customer problem. How we do that, and therefore the delivery and that delivery roadmap is going to change much more frequently. But those kind of big boulders that we want to go after are going to change much less frequently if it's a strategic roadmap.
I love that idea, but then it begs the question, how important is having the clear corporate strategy from leadership to do that? Because if we don't have a clear vision, winning aspiration, as Roger Martin would say, what are we working with, right? If we don't have that where to play, how to win coming from them, it's tough.
Massively. And for many organizations, the roadmap is as strategic as they get, and it shouldn't be. I think Saeed's actually following it is I see some comments from him. He talks about a roadmap being an output of the strategic process. And so that I totally agree. Jana Basto talks about it, a prototype of the strategy. Something has to come first in order for us to be able to make those yes, no, here we're going to play, here we're not going to play decisions. We shouldn't hold the roadmap to that accountability.
I wrote a couple of years ago, I wrote an article basically saying that product management is what connects strategy to execution. And the roadmap is really a key part of that. It's like, okay, if this is where we want to go, this is the order we think we need to go in, right? But we need that strategy to do that, right? Otherwise, we're having to do an assumptive strategy and guess on it. And, we've had this conversation on Product Conversations before on strategy. But I feel like the roadmap sometimes is asked to do too much if we don't have that coming from above. And I could probably go back to corporate strategy being an issue on every call we have. I think I have. May probably will validate that. May, Elliott, your thoughts, misconceptions about roadmaps.
Well, Phil stole mine. He read my mind, or would say great minds think alike. But one thing that I'll add on here is the idea that a roadmap is not a prediction of the future. It is a projection of the future based on what you know right now. And it is always subject to change, because every time you have a conversation and every time conditions change, you learn more, and then you should be adapting the strategy, and the direction could change a little bit or it could change a lot. I like to call it a snapshot in time, but really it's just a matter of here's what we know and here's that projection. And every minute could be a different inflection point.
Yeah, I love that.
I'm going to take a different angle on this.
As you always do.
One of the questions that people ask when they get asked to build a roadmap is that they join a product ops group, and then they ask the question, what is the best road mapping tool? And my response to them is always be very, very, very careful, because that's not the problem you actually need to solve. And whatever road mapping tool you put into place will heavily affect the culture of your company in the next at least 6 months to 2 years, if not more. It's going to set the tone of how you shift your product management culture, discipline, practices, everything to do with it, because it's like the roadmap is a artifact representation of product management, whether you like it or not. Like people when they're like, what are we working on? Like, what are we doing next? What are we doing as a product organization? The first thing they do is not come to you. They go to the roadmap to see, like, where are we going as a product organization or as a portfolio? And then they take that assumption and kind of like overlay it on top of all of their interactions with the product team, right? So whatever tool you put into place, whatever systems that you end up setting up and implementing to get to that roadmap artifact, especially if you start from the bottom without thinking about strategy, especially if you don't think about like how this roadmap actually got put together in the first place, that's what you're working with for the next little while, because it becomes the source of truth, right? It becomes your transparency.
I mean, there's a little bit there. I wish that people would go and self-service with the tool. I've yet to find them do that. It's like you still have to go and take them to the tool manually and walk them through it. Is my experience. Like, I that was my hope when I first put a tool in place, and then I found no one ever goes and looks unless they're in product.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you have like an artifact, right? They're not looking at they don't care about what you wrote under, why we're doing this. They want to know when loyalty is going to get shipped.
Mhm.
They're looking
Yeah.
at the timeline, they're looking at the delivery, they're not looking at why we're doing this, right? So I think there's a whole lot of issues built around that, and I think we've uncovered a lot of it. I mean, scratched at a lot of it anyways. So.
I just wanted to share something that May said, actually, which is when you go, and I've had the fortune of working with a lot of companies on their roadmaps and seeing them, inspecting a company's roadmap or viewing it tells you a lot about how they run product management and how the organization values product management as well. It's massively telling. You can spot the feature factories, you can spot the ones that are embracing more empowered teams. It's really indicative.
I mean, I think that this is, the first time I did what I'll call product ops. This is 20 plus years ago. I was at an enterprise company and we were presenting our long range plans to the senior leadership and the board. And what we realized was we had 10 product managers and we had 10 different views of how people presented information. And so I took the lead and created a standard. Here's how we're going to communicate. And that was for me, the first standard roadmap. And the reality is, I'm echoing back to what May said, is we need to make sure we're aligned on what's going into it, what the output is, what we're communicating, and how do we do that. And, I've seen too many organizations say, oh, we're just going to put AHA or prod plan or something else in without thinking about their operations and what works for their team, and spending the money and then not being happy with it. And so I'll echo May's biggest misconception is that just putting a tool in is going to solve it, and it's not going to solve it.
I just want to share. Sorry, May, go.
I'm just going to add on that, like, a lot of, if you do want to change how you work, a tool is actually a great way to tell people, oh, we bought this tool, we must do this. This is how we must start, like, having these conversations, make sure we do it right, because everyone's going to see it. It's supposed to be transparent. So it's really a great way, a great catalyst for starting the changes. And I was having this conversation with someone else the other day, and these tools, the very first implementation of the roadmap tool lasts about 12 to 36 months, depending on how long the product leader sticks around or if there's like major changes, because the very first implementation is probably going to suck. Like it is, because it's not, you haven't done the work to get to a good roadmap. So the costs of maintaining the way you've done your roadmap and the way you want to change starts conflicting, especially if you're building product ops, you're building better ways of working. That starts conflicting, and most people ditch the tool for a new one. And it's not about this new one is better, it's about you've outgrown what you can do with the old one the way you've set it up. And very few people will set things up from scratch again.
Yeah. I mean, there's something to be said that roadmap tools today are what ERP systems were for companies 20-some years ago. And, it's always going to be more expensive and take longer.
It's less work. It's less work.
It is less work.
We're not setting.
So I want to get a little audience participation here. Nils asked I had responded to him, and Nils asked the question. I had said the ability to have separate documents, a roadmap, and I'll call it a release plan, right? And so I'd love to get your take on this. But when I'm working with clients, I like to say, let's commit to a quarter, right? What's our next quarter? Let's commit to what's going to be in that quarter. With one of my current clients, I've got a high commit, yet high confidence. Yes, these are, above the line are the things that, yes, we're committing to these 12, 14, whatever things. And then there's a line with a soft commit. If we are able to, we will then get to these things. And so it can give some availability, but that is a commitment to the business, a commitment to the organization on next quarter. Here's what we're planning on delivering. And so, are there other ways that you guys have seen outside of a quarterly release plan or whatever it may be that you can sort of separate the communication alignment strategic aspect of a roadmap from a commitment to the organization?
Well, if Noah's going to go, I've always got an answer. I was trying to let someone else go. go first. But okay, so I guess one, the commitment has to come from the team, not from the individuals. Before we even
Understood.
Not just from the product manager putting it there. I think one of the issues is that we call the artifact, the overall document, the roadmap, whereas really the roadmap is one page in this artifact. And the release plan is usually a second page of it or a third page of it that's kind of giving that commitment. I mean, I think there's an element of maturity on your roadmap as well. Like, you say using now, next, and later. Now typically means next 3 months for most people. That's usually what it means. And it's usually, I like to even reframe that and change the columns to deliver, discover, and explore. Because I'm doing things in all three of those columns anyway. The things that are in later, it's broad problem space stuff that I'm investigating. The things in the next column are things I'm doing discovery on so I can deliver later. I'm understanding the problems in depth. I'm evaluating solutions. So I like to switch the language a little bit, because then sales don't look at it and say, you're doing nothing on the things in later. They can actually see we're working to understand it. And then in that deliver column, that first one, I don't mind putting features there and being quite committed to it. And what I don't want to do is put on, well, it's going to release 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, even in that quarter. Because generally, like most people aren't doing those sorts of big bang releases, at least the best places aren't. It's like they might release it tomorrow, and then they might release an update to it the day after, and then another one in the afternoon the same day. Even in enterprise, we're getting to that space now, and actually it's easier often for people to consume it that way. The old logic says it's hard to consume that way, but actually it's easier because you're making smaller changes. They're easier to consume. And so what I like to do is kind of put those commitments into that first column, maybe with some specific timing on big releases. Maybe so if there are certain things we're making some high integrity commitments around, I might put that on another page, kind of say, we're absolutely going to hit this, like GDPR coming in. It wasn't an option. We just had to put it there and say we're going to do it. There are things that are driven by hard external dates. Let's make the commitments.
No, completely and totally. And I love your view of that, because it almost fits with, a client I was working with. There's the development sprint, but then there's really a design and solutioning sprint before that. And then there's the sort of exploration and getting to a problem statement or epic before that. And I like how your things you can almost look at, where is it now? Okay, it's in solutioning. So you're doing product discovery and that type of stuff. It almost helps create a cadence for it. I love that. Other thoughts on, and we don't need everybody commenting on it. Other thoughts on sort of commitment document versus communication and alignment document?
One thing that I'm working with right now in terms of process is making sure that product and design, and then the engineering architects are working ahead in terms of what are we doing and how do we actually get this done in the right way? What is the right experience and what is the right technical alignment there as well? So at RetWorks, as we're thinking about 2025, we're really thinking about planning ahead. So the roadmap is when you're going to deliver, but there's so much work that goes into what actually happens. And what the comments just before kind of made me think of that there overall, about the idea of like product management needs to work super far ahead in terms of getting these things done. But you need to think about it in terms of design from an experience perspective, and then making sure you have the right technical architecture to get these things done, whether you're doing something small or something more of that big bang. So wanted to call that out. It's road mapping adjacent, but I think it applies to this branch of the conversation.
Yeah. I'm not going to go to everybody on this next question, but are there products that don't need roadmaps? I mean,
are there products that don't need roadmaps? Are there organizations that don't need roadmaps?
Ooh, I love that.
I think for a lot of people, a roadmap is, again, a visual representation of your vision and kind of like the higher order strategy of where you're going together, usually like beyond just the smaller teams. And I think that is, some people don't need that if you're not entirely sure. If you're like a 0 to 1 startup and you haven't even launched yet, you have no idea where you're going. You have a pretty good idea of what you need to do next to try it out, to test the market, whatever it might be. But you don't know that a year from now you need to build an integration into Disney, right? Like whatever it might be, you don't know yet, and that's fine, right? So I think, or if you're a really mature product and you're really just doing continuous improvement on it, and you're not really investing in it, like, do you need a roadmap?
Depends if you
End
need
of
to
life
communicate.
roadmap, maybe.
Yeah, it depends if you need to communicate and align. I think, May, I love your correction there in terms of that clarification on the organization. If you're a small organization and you're clear on your goals, you probably don't need a roadmap. And again, it's just a roadmap is just a tool. You don't always need it.
And if
but
we're
you might
shifting
find that with that small organization, they need one at the really strategic level to go and talk to the investors.
Exactly.
And getting the team to work might not need it, but when you get to that external conversation,
to do your Series A or something like that, you may need it to get to where you need to go for that, or for your first customers you're trying to get on board to see where you're trying to go with it, completely and totally. And that's something I've helped people do with product strategy workshops, is like, how do we tell that story, right? How do we, I think too often, especially at that stage, they're trying to be all things to all people, and really what needs to happen is focus in a niche. I had a great question I was going to ask and I forgot it. I'm loving Marlon's comments about 3 Horizons in the chat. I wonder if anyone's got any perspectives on that. I actually, working with a client now, we were calling Horizon 1 was the next 6 to 9 months. This is the next gen. They're mostly focused on parity for a next gen. And I hate the word parity, but the reality is if you're migrating people from your old platform, you have to make sure that you bring in what they need. And so we're calling that sort of our Horizon 1, and Horizon 2 is when we move to innovation and entrepreneurship and differentiation type stuff, new things that are not parity. So I think McKinsey in the Horizon 1, 2, 3, I think the roadmap probably should get into Horizon 2 for me, not just Horizon 1, because we should have some ideas of where we're going. Horizon 3, if it's more the transformative stuff, maybe that's not getting in there as much. Thoughts, other people?
I've always thought that the 3 Horizons was a portfolio strategy, not a product strategy, right? That Horizon 1 is your cash cow that funds the investment in your Horizon 2 and 3 products.
But can you roadmap all of that? Can you have? I often have a portfolio roadmap within an organization, so it's still a roadmap conversation.
And that's probably another topic. A portfolio. I don't know when the last time we did portfolio management was on a product conversation. I think it's probably something we should look into. I think Scott Selhorst would have some things to say on that. We'll have to get him engaged on that one. I'm going to have a little fun. I've never done this before. Jeopardy style question, and I'm going to go to each of you on this. If roadmaps is the answer, what is the question? If roadmaps is the answer, what is the question? And I'm going to start with Elliott so Phil can't steal his answer or question in this case.
I'll say my first is a joke is, what is Phil's reason for being? But overall, if roadmap is the answer, is what is a way to spark the conversation that you need?
I
love that. Thank you, Elliott. That's perfect. May, if roadmaps is the answer, what's the question?
Okay, joke answer first. What is a great way to turn yourself back into waterfall? But really, it's like, what is a way to try to solve everything with a what is the go-to way to solve all of the communication issues in your company, right? Like, this is a communications and alignment issue. And
I love that.
Without putting in that effort, like, the thing is going to do exactly what you think it's going to do, but like, without addressing the underlying systemic causes of the actual issues, it's not going to solve your problems.
Yeah, I love it. Phil,
what is the least understood yet most opinionated thing that exists within the product world?
Justin.
I got two as well. One of them is the jokey one. What is your bonus tied to? and the other one, and we talked about this in chat a little bit, is what decisions have we made as a company previous to now? The roadmap serves as corporate history. Simon Whitkiss, who we've had on the channel, talked about this. And often, as May alluded to this, we get different senior leaders come in 2-3 years, then they go, someone else comes in, tries to do the thing that we did do 3 years ago, but didn't know about it. Showing them that roadmap and that kind of corporate history can help us not to repeat some of the same mistakes we did before, or understand the learnings from there. Often there's nothing that continues that learning on into new leadership and new management.
And I'm going to, digress as I do. I'm taking sort of the conversation I asked Phil about the analyst type thing. And I had a Gartner analyst once tell me that when you present your roadmaps to them, that's how they judge your ability to execute, right? So they look at all the roadmaps you presented over the year and see, and then look at how well you did delivering against that roadmap. The other axis is the completeness of vision, is just their view on how good is your vision, right? Does it align with what they think? But roadmaps are that. I love that view into the past, right? Here's what we've committed. I'm about to use that commit word. Here's what we had planned to do, and here's what we delivered, and it gives us a good visibility into it. So awesome, Steve. Roadmaps is the answer. What's the question?
What is the magic document that can imply that we can deliver more than is possible with the resources we have?
Was that the joke, or was that the...
That's both the joke and the real answer. And, to your point about the analyst roadmap, the roadmap is an articulation of vision, but it's the series of roadmaps that you pointed out that shows your ability to execute. That's brilliant.
Yeah. But what it misses is your ability to learn and change that plan. It's like, I can execute it perfectly, but if I figure out that was the wrong thing, I'm now getting shot at for changing my mind and learning.
Right. Well, and that was one of the principles of the Agile Manifesto. At the end of the day, we want to solve customer problems, not just do what the contract said. And if somebody says the roadmap is the contract, and you find out that that's not really what the customer needs, we need to be able to change it. And you would hope that the analyst community would recognize
understand
that.
It. Yeah, you would hope. And I could say something derogatory about Gartner analysts, and not the Cliff Gilley type. Love Cliff. I'm talking about the more industry software segment type ones who often get very full of themselves, and I guess I did. So
the more Gartnery of the Gartner analysts, right?
Yeah. In the old school 4-quadrant magic quadrant type stuff. So I'm going to use this. I'm going to do it. I'm going to answer this question, and I'm going to be a kiss up, and I'm going to say the question is, what's the best way to find a way to get Justin and Phil on to product conversations to have a great conversation? Roadmaps. There we go. We actually had some audience participation. Scott Salhorst, the question is, how do I sustainably align my organization to a specific but evolving purpose? Boy, he took this one seriously. He didn't have a joke answer there. And Nils, how do I share what I want you to know about what we're working on? So 2 really good things there. Boy, this hour has flown by, as it often does. We always wrap up, and I'm going to, we've got a couple minutes, so we have time for people to do it. Not too much expounding on stuff. That's the wrong word. I don't know what word I'm looking for. Our final question always is, what's your biggest learning or takeaway from this conversation? And so, since Justin and Phil are in this medium, the product conversation for the first time, what's your biggest learning or takeaway from this conversation? Let's start with Justin.
That we all pretty much feel the same way. I think
frustrated.
I'm frustrated. It's not the beautiful visual document that it often should be. It causes a lot of pain. I think that we're all going through this together and have a lot of war stories for it. But also, as Phil picked up on, we haven't yet found a better tool sometimes in order to perform the duties that we ask of the roadmap. I think we try and put too much into the roadmap, maybe so we don't have to create so many views, maybe so that we don't have to update it so often. But the problem is that when we don't do those things, it causes more problems for itself and for us. And so I think that's where people get burnt by roadmaps, is they start off with good intentions, but if you don't tame that beast, then it ends up causing you a lot of pain.
I completely and totally agree. Phil, biggest learning or takeaway?
That I really need to get better at coming up with jokes on the spot because I was shown up by everybody else.
4 for 4. All 4 of them had a joke, even if Steve's was integrated into his. So, Phil, come on.
I failed. This is someone who's planning on doing a product stand-up routine next year. Like, I've been challenged to do it for a conference. So, I'm feeling like I let the side down. But in general, I think I'd go by, it feels like everyone is frustrated by roadmaps, yet everyone knows that we can do it better. I think that's probably, maybe it's not a new learning, but it's reminding me of that particular kind of issue.
Completely and totally agree.
Yeah.
Elliott.
Yeah, I think it was the idea that the roadmap is to have a conversation and to build your roadmap based around the conversation that you want to have. The reason I said that is because I think that I've always thought about it as the output, but really it's about the input. You should design it around what you're trying to discover. So
that's actually a great way. It's the input, not the output. The output is just a byproduct, right? Yeah. From the inputs in the conversation. I love that, Elliott.
New thinking for me.
Yeah. Well, that's what this is about. Trying to find, learn new things. Again, we've done going on 200 of these, and I've learned something every time. So, I mean, that's what it's about. May.
How do we get the people who make roadmap products to watch this thing and to go listen to Phil and Justin's thing? Because they set the standards for what are roadmaps today. Anytime you start thinking about roadmaps again, most people eventually get to the point where they're like, we need a tool because what we're doing is not working. And their standards is also why we're suffering. Like I have a love-hate relationship with these tools, and it's like, yes, you're doing some of it right, but why is the rest of it so wrong? So can we, people, please, have conversations with your users because you're not solving our problems.
Yeah. Wonderful. My friend Steve, biggest learning or takeaway?
I really like the realization of different views for different personas. Thinking about, it's amazing how simple product management can be. It's getting back to what problem are we trying to solve for what persona, and let that drive the solution instead of saying, well, we've got this solution. How can we modify the solution to meet everyone's need? So views by persona.
I love that. I mean, Elliott had gone in on one of the places that I was probably going to go in on, which is sort of the, it's the process, it's the whatever. But I'm going to go back to almost the back end of Steve's comment, is that it's all coming from a single source of truth, right? So it's not like you're building 5 different roadmaps. You're building one roadmap that may have 5 different views into it based on the persona you're in, their need and their problem we're solving for it. And so, again, sort of like Phil said, it's nothing that I didn't know, but sort of just hearing it again and relearning it, really that resonated with me. And other takeaway, boy, we need to get Justin and Phil on again, and not even make it a roadmap thing, just to get them on. Such great voices to add to our community. We do these every other week. I love the conversations. This one was, as Scott Selhorst would often say, is, can we do a second hour? I feel like this conversation can keep going. I know Justin's on holiday, so I'm going to say we won't do that. But Justin and Phil, thank you so much for joining us this week. Thank you for having me on your podcast. I really enjoyed that. And Elliott, we need to get you back more often. And to May and Steve, thank you for being my partner and helping make these happen in such a great conversation. To everybody in the comments, this may have been the most active comments out there, and we really appreciate it. I think it makes the whole live experience even better. So thank you guys so much for being part of that. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with another product conversations. Everybody, have a great weekend. Take care.
Great weekend.
Cheers.
Happy Thanksgiving, folks.
Thanks all.